Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first Environment, Infrastructure, and Transportation Policies Committee meeting of 2019. As this is the first meeting of the year, we will start with the election of officers. So I will call and see if there are any nominations for the position of chair. Councillor Neal? Excellent. Councillor Stroud, do you accept the nomination? Is there a seconder? I'll take my pick there. Any other nominations? Seeing none, I'll close the nomination and call the question. All in favor? That carries. And we will now conduct the election of the vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair? Councillor Neal. Councillor Doherty, do you accept? Seconded by Councillor Stroud. No other nominations, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Carries. Excellent. I will now turn the chair over to Councillor Stroud.
Thank you to my esteemed colleagues for the support, and I'm looking forward to another productive term, environment, infrastructure, transportation. The next item on the agenda is the agenda, so approving the agenda that's in the package. There's 3 briefings and some items of business. So I need a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Any suggestions to change anything on the printed agenda? Seeing none, we need to approve it. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. The next thing is the confirmation of minutes from our last meeting. And that...
Special meetings.
This is a special meeting, so we don't need to do that. That's empty. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Delegations. Do we have any? No. No delegations. There are 3 briefings. The first 2 are both by the Director of Solid Waste, Heather Roberts. The first one has to do with the recommendation to proceed with the dual stream recycling system. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you through your chair. I am presenting a briefing tonight on a recommendation to convert our system to a dual stream recycling system. This is a special meeting because this is time sensitive. We want to get going on the next phases of trying to implement this for July 1st, 2021. And it's critical for us to know actual costs in time for budget in August so that we can determine what it would cost us to transition the system to dual stream and make sure that we're budgeting for it in 2021 and other years. And also, if it isn't cost neutral for us to implement this, looking for other opportunities to offset the costs. So the briefing details tonight, I want to review with you the current system that we have today. And what it would look like if we converted to a dual stream system, some background on how we got to this recommendation tonight, and what those next steps would look like. And before I actually move on to show you what the current system is in converting, I'd like to just show you, you guys a quick video. It's part of our video series in solid waste. It's the recycling do's and don'ts.
Kingston in the solid waste division as a recycling collector. It's really difficult to collect overflowing box because the material spills out while you're transferring to the truck or you're trying to sort it, and that really increases the efficiency of the process having to pick up the litter. The best way to keep your recyclables from becoming litter on the street, especially on rainy days, is to put your heavy materials on top and to not overfill your boxes, fill them 3/4 full. only blue boxes because plastic bags can be used to help contain the paper and gray box. Plus, the process is set up that card. Plastic bags get recycled with the other big material. Broken glass should never go into your recycling. Broken glass should be put into a cardboard box, taped up and labeled as such, and placed with your garbage. Aluminum containers lined up side by side enhances the visibility from the driver coming down the road to identify the material. It's a lot safer for the collector to access the material of the line because you don't have to overexpand or overexert your bomb. If any resident wants extra boxes, you can always pick them up at the Kingston Recycling Center. For more information, visit cityofkingston.ca/waste.
I won't make you watch them all. But that video was done a couple of years ago, and it's got over 16,000 views. And it's been really successful, and I just wanted to show it because it provides a little bit more details of how on one week your blue box goes out, and on another week your gray box goes out. So this is our current 4-stream system today. And we have to collect this way and provide the service to the customer this way, all because of how we process the recyclables at the material recovery facility or the recycling plant. So on gray box week, there's 2 streams that are collected. So we can only collect 2 streams every single week. So when we come by your house, the truck that we're using has 2 compartments. On gray box week, we separate the cardboard from all of those other gray box materials. And then on blue box week, when we come, we pick up your box and glass is separated from the rest of your container. So that's why I call it a 4-stream system, but for most residents, they identify it as already a 2-stream or a dual stream because there's 2 different box colors, but we have to collect them on alternating weeks because we can only take 2 streams at one time. So converting to a dual stream system. So this was originally identified as a preferred approach in our integrated waste management plan, and that's why we've been researching it for a while. And so what a converted dual stream system would look like is that we can collect 2 streams every single week still, but we can take the entire contents of the gray box and the entire contents of the blue box. So still 2 compartments on the truck, but the piece that needs to change is retrofitting the recycling plant. So right now the recycling plant again has 4 lines where we have to separate everything. But if we converted it and to put it simply, if we added a cardboard screen and a glass breaker, then we could collect all recyclables every single week. Still in a gray box, still in a blue box, but together in the same week. So instead of only coming by 26 times to take your blue box and 26 times to take your gray box, 52 times a year, you get both boxes picked up. So the background. Again, this was a preferred approach in our integrated waste management plan that was approved by council back in 2009, amongst other things, which we'll talk about a bit today. And basically, we've been researching the feasibility of changing the system for a decade. And we've had to have various pauses in that feasibility due to waste legislation changes. And so through that, we've looked at a number of different scenarios. And back in June 2018, we came back and we said, okay, now we understand a little bit better what the province intends to do with changing the program to a full producer responsibility regime. And we think that the best solution is to go ahead, do a final business plan for the MRF, and look at what our costs are to continue to operate under a status quo scenario versus retrofitting the plant to a dual stream, which will allow us to go truly to a dual stream and go back to picking up blue and gray boxes every single week. So we did that, and we're back, and we want to tell you that the retrofit to dual stream fits within the approved capital budget of $3.25 million, In fact, we think we can upgrade the MRF for under $2 million, but it will cost $100,000 more per year to operate in a dual stream. And that is simply because we're adding more equipment, we're adding a cardboard screen, we're adding a glass breaker, there's more equipment that will need to be fixed. But there are possible savings on the collection side. So the business plan did not include looking at what those collection savings might be. But we do have a contractor in the city that does the majority of the recycling collection, and we think when we go back out to procure those services, we'll see a lower cost. There's many other advantages to dual stream, one of them being a big convenience on the citizen or the resident. So right now, if you put out the wrong stuff on the wrong week, you forget that it's gray box week, you put out your blue box, we don't collect it. Under what we're proposing to go to dual stream, it wouldn't matter. All recyclables will be taken as long as they're in the right box. We could probably go to a bigger box size, and we think that that will cut down on litter. And the most important thing is we know that there's capacity issues. So people can't hang on to recyclables for 2 weeks and wait for collection. And we know that some of those recyclables are ending up in the garbage, and we're not capturing as much as we could from landfill. So this will help with our goal of achieving 65% waste diversion by 2025. Also, another important advantage of this is that it would align the city better when the Blue Box program plan transitions to a full producer responsibility regime. It's more likely that the producers would be interested in our facility. So the recommendations and next steps of the report that's in front of you tonight, we wish to proceed with the next phase. To convert the system to dual stream. It is time sensitive. We'd like to complete this over the next 6 months so that we've got costs of what it would actually cost us to implement the change and determine if it's cost neutral or if we need to look at other savings to offset those costs. So the next steps that we want to do is go out with an RFP to retrofit for the design and build of the plant, and also an RFP to look at what those actual collection costs would be to see if there's any savings. This work also fits in well with the consultation that we'd like to undertake with the public. And at this time, I'd take any questions. Thank you.
So committee members are permitted to ask questions. It's committee members only on briefings, and then when it's an item of business, members of the public can ask questions as well. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Questions. I know that we have a capital reserve fund for waste, for recycling. Is that, and when was that set up? Has that money been in that reserve a while, or did we just approve that at our last capital budget?
Sure, so through your chair. That money has been in the capital budget for over a decade. In fact, it was $5 million in 2018, and recently there was funds removed from it, and that took it down to $3.25 million because of the fact that we knew that we weren't going to need $5 million to undertake.
But it's an earmarked capital reserve.
That's correct. It's earmarked.
Okay. The $100,000 additional operating yearly, I guess that makes sense to me if indeed this, in your professional opinion, this will gain more recovery of materials. I know we've kind of plateaued at 60%, and which is good. I mean, there's only, I think, 2 or 3 communities in the province that have reached 60%, but our goal, our upcoming goal is 65%. And so do you feel that this will encourage greater opportunity to divert and will gain in the long term?
Thank you, and through your, I think when we have done some waste composition audits, what we've seen are some very obvious recyclables in garbage bags, which leads us to believe that perhaps people have disposed of those in the garbage because they didn't have capacity in their blue boxes or in their gray boxes. They didn't have the capacity left to wait for 2 weeks for collection. And how we would gauge that is because we also would look at what they've put in their blue and their gray box, and we know that they know a pop can is recyclable. They put one pop can in the blue box, so why not the other? And as for the additional $100,000 for operating costs, again, we are adding an additional equipment that will need to be operated at the facility. There will be moving parts to that equipment that we need to make sure it's clean and it's operating. Other pieces that will fail and we'll have to replace for maintenance. And the other piece of it too is that we expect to make the same amount of revenue off of the sale of the materials, but we know when we bring glass into the plant and we introduce glass, and there might be small pieces of it in some of the other streams, buyers will look at that. And so it is quite possible that we'll lose the little bit of revenue that we make on glass because it will have some other contaminants in it. And we know that the glass itself poses a risk to contaminate other materials as well. It's a very small chance. Those systems have come a long way. They're being used at many other material recovery facilities that have not seen an issue with material markets. But when our consultant was looking at that as part of our business plan, they did flag that.
I believe I heard that you anticipate some savings in the pickup under a dual stream, and that may somewhat mitigate the $100,000 on our next contract.
Yep, so through you, Your Chair, that's correct. Our existing fee that we're paying for collection is from an RFP from 2012. So it is a mature contract. It is set up as such that it's alternating and there's sortation required from the collector at the curb. If we were to procure weekly service where the collector just needs to tip 2 bins and there isn't any sortation required, we do expect that the time spent stop will reduce, and it's very likely that they wouldn't require that much, the same level of effort to complete what they're completing today. And when we look at other communities that are collecting dual stream like that, they do have a lower fee than what we're paying. We won't know for certain until we go out.
Thank you very much.
Next on my list is Anik.
Thank you, through your chair. So if council tonight says yes to go forward with this, and then we do the RFP, and if the RFP doesn't come back cost neutral, can council then say no? Like, we're taking a risk then saying yes and hoping that it comes out cost neutral.
So through you, Your Chair, that's why we've invited as the next phase, that we want to go out and do those RFPs and take a look at what the actual costs will be so that we can do it in the budget. And I think, yes, you're not committing to doing it tonight. If there are going to be higher fees than what we were expecting, or we're not able to do it cost neutral, then we need to come back and tell you that they're not going to be cost neutral.
Thank you. And then at that point, we can, or is it too late to say no at that point?
Through your chair, we will come back to confirm that it is not cost neutral, and we would also take a look at it at budgeting. So what we know is that we wouldn't anticipate making this change until July 1st, 2021. So when we're looking out at the other projections, how would we fit this into 2021 and it be cost neutral? So we could look at it and find other cost savings potentially, but my intention is we will come back and let you know if there's going to be additional costs. And it would be built into the budget from there, but we will be back. And yes, you could say no.
At that later point, say no. It's just, I don't want to fund that $100,000 shortfall by putting up the garbage tags or by paying for every bag, because I've already gotten a lot of bad emails about it, and I don't support funding that $100,000 shortfall from those two ways, so I don't know how to vote tonight.
Commissioner King.
Through the chair, I think that Ms. Roberts has responded correctly in that the wording of the recommendation tonight is that we proceed with the next phase. and specifically following that we issue the RFPs. The RFPs that are issued by the city do not obligate us to proceed. So we can issue an RFP, and it doesn't mean that we have to actually award one. That's why we use RFPs oftentimes, even if we know enough of the specifications where something could be closer to a tender. So my understanding would be that we can do this. If the costs actually are higher than what the current operating costs are going to be, then I think we would have to come back to council, and that's where part of the consultation in the accompanying report on the integrated waste management strategy was putting a whole host of possibilities on the table. And then, but that would be a significant change that would have to be approved by council. And the way in which we might offset that would usually, if it's those items that you've referred to, those would be service level changes, and they would have to be approved.
So for the members of the public, what the Commissioner just said, the approval of council is required for extra spending. It's also required for significant changes to the service levels. So either one of those things, and so, correct me if I'm wrong, the decision point for the extra spending or for the change in service levels is not here tonight, but at a later time at council. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, Chair. Can you talk a little bit more about the full producer responsibility? Now, is that a federal or provincial legislation that's proposed, that's coming down the line?
So through you, your chair, it is the provincial waste legislation. So back in 2016, the province passed the Waste Free Ontario Act, which has a lot of changes, but in particular to the Blue Box program plan, the province also has a Blue Box program plan where they have spelled out a specific role for a municipality. So right now, all of the costs to operate the recycling program in Kingston are technically % of those costs are covered by the producers. Producers are anybody who's making any of the things that go in your blue and your gray box. And the full producer responsibility refers to shifting that 50-50 shared financial model to 100% producer responsibility, where the province would make producers responsible for delivering the service and paying for the service. So it gives them much more, the intention of it is to make them more responsible for the products that they put on the shelf and make them responsible for trying to reintegrate those and recover them for the new products that they're making as well.
Yeah. Are we expecting, or could it possibly be that this will be repealed by the current government?
So through your chair, there has been no indication of that. What we have heard from the new provincial government, the old provincial government put out a Waste Free Ontario Act strategy that identified timelines that they intended to move waste programs along. And what we've seen from the new government is they've put out a Made in Ontario environmental plan that they issued last November. And most recently today, they just put out a discussion paper on waste. And their full intention is still to transition the program to full producer responsibility, but no timeline set, just that it's going to take a while.
Okay, but that sounds really positive. So I have two more questions. The consultation with the public that you mentioned, can you describe that a little bit more?
So the consultation, through your chair, the consultation that we're going to undertake?
Yeah, you mentioned consultation with the public, which I was wondering
Yeah.
because you know what you're going to do, so what would the consultation
So
be?
the next briefing that I'm going to provide is on the next strategies for the integrated waste management plan. And while we go through that consultation, providing information on implementing the dual stream system will be included in that. But we've been looking at dual stream for the last decade and done some consultation along that way as well to lead us up to this point.
So it's more like an educational kind of event.
That's right. So we're going to consult on other strategies to get to the 65% waste diversion rate.
Right.
But in part of that, we'll also be educating and promoting that we're still looking at this dual stream system. Thank you.
So I see our committee member is here ex officio, Councillor Hutchison. Normally, I'm told by the clerk, non-committee members cannot ask questions at briefings. So I'm asking for the committee to approve Councillor Hutchison asking a question at this time. All those in favor? And you've got the committee's consent to waive the procedural rules to allow Councillor Hutchison to ask a question. Go ahead.
I'd like to do where the provincial government is at. I mean, originally they were going to do this by this time. Now there's a change in government. So if we don't know what the this provincial government is doing, why are we rushing to do this? Since the savings are minimal, and we don't really know if we're even going to save money. We can't really demonstrate it. That's what I read in the report.
So through your chair, we don't know how quickly the provincial government is going to move on this. And we've been waiting for them to make a decision since about 2013 when they started this conversation, and it's been 6 years and there's still no indication when full producer responsibility will happen. So in the meantime, we are still providing this service and we're still operating the facility. We're still need to provide collection under regulation. And so the other point that's made in this report is that even if we don't go to dual stream, we still need to make some investment into this facility. So we've been pausing doing anything because we've been waiting to find out what is going to happen in a new producer responsibility regime. And we still have no answers on that. But what we know is that we've been working towards this goal. What we know is that if we proceed with dual stream, it's very likely that the producers are going to want to continue to do business with the city of Kingston. We've modernized our MRF. We're providing a dual stream system. They're more likely to want to use our facility to meet their requirements under regulation. So we still need to do something regardless, and we've still been carrying on with this approved approach that was identified in 2009 as part of that integrated waste management plan. And we know that if we want to implement it for July 1st, 2021, which would be a natural date when a new collection contract would have to be in place. So that's why we've been working towards this date. It's not necessarily that we're rushing to get to it by that date. That would be a suitable date to transition the program.
Why for a dual system rather than this type of system we've got? Surely they're just concerned about receiving the material.
So through your chair, they will be looking for efficient facilities to use to meet their requirements. They will also be very financial savvy as well, and they will be likely able to make changes to the program if they wish to do so. And what we've heard from them is that they like the dual stream model. And we've been working towards it for a number of years. And I think that puts us in a better position to align with the future, with a producer regime.
Okay, I'll allow one more question.
So that's really the main, because the reasons given for the improvements, like comparing 26 blue boxes to 26 gray box pickups, it's still 52 pickups no matter what you do. And I don't know about other people, but it's all the same to me. When I'm putting one box out or two boxes, in fact, 2 boxes is more of a pain. But so it seems to me the main reason you're giving is to be ready for the changes that we expect coming from the province, or
Through your chair,
what is now the stewards.
I think it's an advantage. I don't think that's why we're doing this. We've been looking at this for a decade now. It adds a lot of convenience, and I understand perhaps it doesn't seem like a convenience to everybody, but we know that it's the direction we've been moving in. We know from people that they would like to put out both of their blue and their gray box every single week, and there could be savings on the collection side as well.
Okay, I have a question. A lot of this, it does hinge on the future look of recycling in Kingston. So could you remind us, because we talked about this last time, what things will actually look like for us as a municipality and for the MRF in a post-legislation era where that full producer pay is actually a reality? What does that look like for us and the MRF?
Through you. I don't know. So I don't have the full answer for that. The province has not provided regulation of what our role or our responsibility is going to be in a new producer responsibility regime, nor have they completely detailed to the producer what the responsibility or role will be. They're hoping that we find a mix that involves both. So when we went through a consultation process before with Stewardship Ontario, what we found out is that the producers actually have no interest in performing collection. They are still intending to have contracts with municipalities to offer that service. And what we know is they want it to be very cost effective. And the most cost effective way, we think, based on industry and based on what other municipalities are doing, a cost effective way is to offer dual stream. So we are moving in the right direction by offering a dual stream program, because in a producer-led program, that's probably where we're going to end up with them. And then in terms of the processing facility, again, I don't know. What we heard at consultation was that they are interested in setting up super MRFs in the province. But how they would do that and how they intend on transferring recyclables all over the province while still achieving greenhouse gas emission goals, we don't know what that looks like today. So again, the report details that something has to be done to the MRF. Our equipment is aging, we haven't replaced, and we're hoping to move forward with dual stream.
Okay, so what you just said about the future that we do know is that private, when it is in the hands of the private interests that are the producers, when it's in the producers' hands, they will almost certainly prefer this dual stream model. But my question is, how do we know that?
So through you, there's no certainty around that. It's through discussions that have been had with Stewardship Ontario, who represent all of those producers. We have a sense of the programs that they like, the programs that they're sick and tired of funding and have no control over, which includes a lot of the single stream programs that are just not producing a clean product that can be turned into new things. So what we've heard from them is that they do prefer a dual stream model. And in fact, many municipalities that are operating single stream in the province right now are researching how to go back to dual stream. And then any that aren't doing dual stream, like ourselves, are still looking for efficiencies and how to continue to deliver that service efficiently and conveniently to their citizens.
So essentially, there is no certainty, but the writing seems to be on the wall if you're reading the tea leaves. That's kind of what you're saying. Okay. Right. Well, just keep in mind, we have 3 briefings, and we also need to hear the second briefing, which is the bigger picture of the future of waste management. So I'm just wondering if maybe we should keep moving along and get to the next briefing. And because it's the same presenter, if you have any further future questions with that new context, you can just ask them at that time. That's okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to the next briefing. And the clerk has just reminded me that when it's an item of business, everybody has another opportunity to ask questions, including members of the public.
Okay, so thank you. This other briefing is with regards to our waste diversion rate and our integrated waste management plan. The information here tonight is just going to provide you a background on where we are with our waste diversion rate, some past strategies that have been implemented over the years, and some strategies that we would like to go out and consult and engage with the public on to continue to move forward with Council's goal of achieving a 65% waste diversion rate by 2025. This work is time sensitive as well. We want to go out and consult with the public while we're determining the cost to implement a dual stream system, so that we can identify some perhaps cost savings by delivering services in a different manner. So before I get into the briefing, I just want to go through a couple of definitions here as I'm talking about them. Waste diversion rate is the percentage of waste diverted from landfill. Integrated waste management system is the combination and interaction of programs and policies to reduce and manage waste. So we have an integrated waste management system in Kingston. It's how your garbage program, your recycling program, your green bin program all work together, other depots that we offer, our household hazardous waste facility, and how they all complement and interact with each other. Our integrated waste management plan defines our vision for our community for waste management and the strategies to optimize interaction and integration between the waste streams. Preferred approaches are the strategies that are identified in the integrated waste management plan. Perhaps strategy was not a buzzword that was used back in 2009, and preferred approaches was used. Dual stream recycling, again, refers to only 2 streams of recyclables collected and delivered for processing. A summary of this information. So the briefing tonight is going to provide you with some key highlights of where the city is today. It started in 2006. The city's waste diversion rate was 45%. At that time, council directed staff to develop an integrated waste management plan to look at ways to increase that waste diversion rate, and they set a goal of 65% waste diversion by 2012. Between 2007 and 2009, council approved various parts of that integrated waste management plan, and most notably, the preferred approaches and strategies that they wanted staff to undertake. Throughout 2009 and 2011, the preferred approaches were researched, initiatives were implemented, most notably one being the green bin program that started in 2009. This year, we are celebrating a decade of green bin in Kingston. In 2012, the 65 waste diversion goal that was set back in 2006 was not achieved. So between 2012 and 2015, work continued to research to implement the preferred approaches. The one-bag garbage limit was implemented. We continued to look at the feasibility of offering dual stream recycling and the feasibility of non-landfill options for garbage, and more enhancements were made to the integrated system. 2015, council reset that goal of 65% by 2012 to 60% by 2018, which was the term of their council, with still 65% by 2025. We did a study that indicated an approach of doing a regional dual stream material recovery facility. It looked at increasing and expanding that facility to be 25,000 tons per year. Right now, just to give you a sense, we do about 12,000 tons per year. But then the Waste Free Ontario Act was released, which will change the operational and financial roles and responsibilities and eventually lead into that full producer responsibility model. And work to implement the dual stream recycling was paused for a while. But then throughout 15 and 18, we continued to look at how the new legislation would impact our waste programs. We did more enhancements to the system. We redesigned communications. We started an annual curbside battery recycling program. We're still operating public depots. We have a new scrap metal bin. Most preferred approaches have been implemented or are pending approval, one being what we just talked about tonight, which is the recommendation to move forward with dual stream. Non-landfill treatment options for garbage were identified to be included in the next RFP for garbage disposal. The 60% waste diversion goal was achieved in 2015, 2016, and 2017. We still don't have numbers confirmed for 18. But the diversion rate has peaked and flatlined. And And we're ready to start to look at new strategies and develop them as part of our integrated waste management plan to continue to reach Council's goal of 65% waste diversion by 2025. So here is a graph of our waste diversion rate. You can see that since about 2011, we've been on a steady incline, but for the last few years, we reached a peak, but that was just an anomaly based on yard waste leaving our site. But for the last 3 years, we've flatlined. The preferred approaches to achieve 60% have been implemented. We know that this waste diversion rate is likely to stay status quo since we've seen it over the last few years, even though we've implemented other enhancements. And the voluntary participation in the diversion programs is still voluntary. And basically what we're seeing is that the level of effort that residents are going to put into reducing and diverting waste in the existing integrated system has flatlined. So some waste composition data from our 2018 audit shows you that the average household generates, or what they put out, about 49% of it goes to garbage and 51% is diverted materials. If you're wondering how we make up the 60%, it's from the other diversion programs that we have. The average home generates 665 kgs of garbage per year, all waste per year, diverts 337 kgs, which rounds out to 51% diversion. What's really interesting about this data, though, that we collected So what's really interesting is about putting waste in its place. So what we learned from our waste composition study is that really only 162 kgs of that whole pie of garbage is actually waste that should go to landfill. So the programs that we're offering today, it is possible to achieve a 76% waste diversion rate. If everybody was putting waste in the right place and using the programs that we offer today, like the recycling program and the green bin program, we could achieve a 76%. So what we know is that we're offering the right tools, we're offering the right programs and giving the availability to divert that waste, but our residents aren't using that to its maximum potential. So some new strategies are needed, perhaps. And so what I'd like to say in this report that is being provided for information tonight, these are just options. And these are options that are used by other municipalities in Ontario and around the world to get people to divert more of their household garbage. So I've provided a list of those. They're in the report. I'm not going to go through all of them one by one. But we do feel that these options that are presented, we'd like them to form the basis of our public engagement and consultation. We've used many of these before when we've gone out to engage and consult with the public, and we've already got some data on that as well. But we're ready to go back out and start talking to people and get their ideas as well. Perhaps they've been to other cities and other countries and seen other waste programs, and we want to hear their ideas of how we can get to 65% by 2025. So the next steps, we'd like to continue with the work already in progress that's included in the Integrated Waste Management Plan. Consult with the public, share the goal, share the data, and share some potential waste management strategies that could be used. Identified preferred strategies that would fit in with the existing system today so that we're not adding costs. We'd like to be as cost effective as possibly and see changes not have a cost. And we would be coming back with recommendations for council's approval. And I've just added here that we've got pending approval to proceed with the dual stream, which is part of works in progress in the Integrated Waste Management Plan. So that leaves us to more questions. Thank you.
So yes, committee members are permitted to ask questions. Questions only about the briefing. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
For your presentation, interesting. During the election, I had quite a few people mention that we used to have large item pickups, and a lot of people want to bring them back. So that's one question that I have. Any potential, do we consider that part of waste too?
Absolutely. So through your chair, we used to deliver a pickup. I've been with the city since 2010, and we stopped it a number of years before I started at the city. But it was something that we used to offer. It was an unlimited amount of things that could be left at the curb. We got boats, sheds. There's some interesting pictures of what people would leave at the curbside. It would not be a best practice or a strategy to help reduce waste from landfill by offering large pickup. What we have implemented is 3 community giveaway days that we advertise for the community to promote people putting things at the end of their driveway that still have a use. So in the waste industry, common knowledge is that when you allow people to put large items at the curb, they are going to use that service. It's part of their taxes, and they may not consider how that item could be reused. So there's lots of reuse centers in the city. There's Kijiji. The internet's a wonderful place to trade things, to share things, to give things away for free. And so it's certainly, we know that people are interested about bringing that back, and we, as part of the consultation, would receive that information from people and look at it.
Businesses. Right now they're paying, and are we losing a lot of opportunities by not including businesses? And I did notice you mentioned on the list, it included potentially having high-rises, apartment buildings for green bins, but just like to hear more about, so apartments as well as businesses. Thanks.
So every apartment in the city of Kingston is eligible for recycling and green bin collection today, but it is voluntary participation. So they do not have to voluntarily use the recycling program or the green bin program as it stands today. So that's their choice. We will provide them with that service if they wish us to. They can opt in for garbage collection, and there's an additional disposal fee that is added onto their taxes. So that's the multi-res side. Your question about businesses, we do allow businesses in the downtown business area to opt in for garbage collection. So we have that identified as a special collection area in our waste management bylaw. But all other, we would call it the IC&I sector, which would be institutional, commercial, and industrial. To date, we have not extended any waste level of service to them for collection. So that would certainly add cost onto the solid waste management operating budget. And if that was something that council wished us to do, we would have to come back with the costs of offering that service.
And just to further your answer, 65% target and the way that it's calculated, commercial waste is not part of that calculation, but multi-res is that correct?
Through you. So thank you. I missed that point, that the province of Ontario is really the regulatory body that confirms our waste diversion rate based on data that we submit to them, and that is correct. Any commercial business or IC&I sector does not, any waste that we would divert from their businesses would not be included in that. It's for residential waste only.
Okay, thanks. Just one more question. And have we ever, or any other community ever explored options like showing how much people save if they do this, like to encourage people, like save in taxes if they were to recycle and use the green bin? Like, would that be kind of an incentive for them to quantify that this actually, in the long run, saves the city and their taxes?
So through you, your chair, we have done some campaigns where we have provided information on the value of certain recyclables and the value that it brings if those are captured. But to be quite honest with you, diversion programs are still more expensive than landfilling in the province of Ontario. And part of this legislation change from the province to move to a circular economy is all about starting to recover more waste materials and have landfill costs be more expensive than diversion programs. But currently today, diversion costs more than landfilling.
That's a pretty important thing to know when we're talking about this. Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I was on council way back in the 90s when we had large item pickup. And it's a nice to have, but it's the biggest pain to administer. And correct me if I'm wrong, it would have a negative impact on our calculations for waste diversion, right? Because we would be landfilling tons and tons of old couches that have no recycle value. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. For all large article pickups, everything just went to landfill.
Thank you. And I did have this conversation briefly with you the other day when we chatted. I think it's really, really important that we get the message out there that what we have in front of us right now is an information report. It's not the gospel. It's not what we're moving on to. There will be full public consultation and focus groups and recommendations to come back for this committee's approval and then council approval to achieve some of those greater. So that list that we see before us, we've all received email about it, and we've all read rants on social media about it. But in fact, all it is these are some options to be considered if we truly want to try to achieve our 65% target. Is that accurate?
Through your chair, that's accurate. This is just a list of things that could be done. They're options. We want to get out, talk to people, consult, and then we would be back with recommendations to EITP and then, of course, to council. So none of these things are going to go forward without you folks seeing them and without you guys approving them. And I know that there's rants going on, and I would also say that there have been rants in the past about people, not using diversion programs. And we hear those every day from people as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Mr. Through you. So for that, I do like number 8, the mandatory use of green bins at multi-residential properties. So legally, do we, if we went towards that at some point in the future, is it a bylaw that we implement? Is that how it would be enforced? And are other cities, do they have that mandatory use as well?
Through you, your chair. We have a solid waste management bylaw, so we would come forward with that piece for an amendment where we would make it mandatory for multi-residential buildings to have to use the green bin program, or perhaps demonstrate that they have a source-separated organics program on site. I'd also like to note that's an important point to bring up. So the provincial government has issued a policy statement on organics that is still active today in today's provincial government. I will be coming forward with some details on that. That policy statement from the province may, some of the things that are in there, multi-residential building operators and owners may not have a choice. So it might not even end up being a choice of city council. It may be a provincial policy statement that the province makes the municipality undertake and make sure is available in their community as part of that. You're welcome.
Okay, I have a question about some of these options that were on that list. So this is, in case you're wondering where the list is, it's on page 25 of the package or at page 10 of the report. Number 8 was what Councillor Osana was just talking about, mandatory green bins. I think that's a great idea as well. Number 10 is about the 2 different sizes. So this would be, currently we have 80 liter, and so this would be sort of the apartment size green bin that people talk about, that second size?
Yeah, that's right, through your chair. What we hear from people that come to pick up green bins at CARC is that they wish they could have a smaller bin that they've seen downtown residents put out on Princess Street. We feel that there's other people in the community that, for even accessibility reasons, find it difficult to use that 80-liter bin. It is heavy with rubber wheels, so we would just like to offer a smaller size, but we've been waiting for a couple of vehicles to be naturally replaced as part of our fleet. And so once we had those pieces of equipment ready to go and they were able to properly service a smaller bin, that's a quick option that we could do to provide more convenience. And maybe even some people that aren't using the program because they don't like the 80-liter bin feel that they would start using the program if they had a smaller bin that was easier to store.
Okay, and then just, I guess this isn't really a question, but it'll say number 4 seems to me that it would be controversial, going to bi-weekly. Obviously, there'd be a huge cost savings upside to that option, but it would be quite controversial, I would think, and you're probably aware of that?
I am aware of it, and many other municipalities have done it. I think one close to us that's very large would be the City of Ottawa. So the City of Ottawa has gone to bi-weekly garbage collection. They've shared their ups and downs of that, and absolutely, it's some like it, some don't like it, and that's why we want to get out and consult with the public and see how they feel. I've also put there that option could allow for the bi-weekly collection of yard waste, which is something also that we know our residents want, but we wouldn't be able to implement additional yard waste collection without adding costs into our operating budget. So perhaps going to a bi-weekly garbage collection would allow us to also collect yard waste bi-weekly and give them something back as well.
Okay, so that's questions for the briefing. Don't forget this information report. We'll be able to ask more questions when it's an item of business. So thank you very much for your
Nice ringtone.
Yes. That was someone from the city calling on the question. No. All right, so that's the second briefing. We'll move on to the third briefing, and that one is from Mr. Semple, the Director of Transportation Services, and it is regarding the Active Transportation Implementation Plan. Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Ooh, got quite a shock from that laptop. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for having me here tonight. I'm here tonight to talk about a bit of a status update on where we are with the city's active transportation master plan. Give you an update on the steps that we've taken to turn that master plan into a short-term implementation plan that we'll be bringing to you, and talk a little bit about some of the linkages that exist between the projects that are underway in 2019 and how they support those goals of the master plan that was adopted last year. So as a reminder, sort of what we are looking at within the city from a transportation goal standpoint is really a 20% target on active transportation trips, 15% target for transit, and then the remainder targeted in vehicles. And I think it's well understood sort of the approach that's been taken on transit and the programs that are in place and the expansion that's in that area supporting that shift in those trips. But what was not well defined is that approach that the city was going to take in order to achieve that 20% target for active transportation. So then that's what I'd like to talk a little bit about tonight. So we have that's the approach that we took with developing the master plan. And it was really about creating a framework and a strategy that would speak to the infrastructure that the city needed to build, the programs that we needed to be put in place, and the initiatives that would help us drive that target of 20%. So the plan was adopted under the previous council in June of 2018. And I've provided a copy to everyone. It's available on the city's website. But from a highlight standpoint, there's sort of three main areas that the master plan is focused on. One, how do we develop a comprehensive citywide active transportation network? So a network of pathways and cycling lanes and pedestrian connections that allow people to travel across the city. What do we do at a neighborhood level to understand how more of those smaller trips within a neighborhood can be made in an active way? And what sort of programs and partnerships need to be put in place so that we can create a culture of active transportation and support a culture of active transportation within the city? So from the standpoint of our next steps then, when the plan was adopted last June, our next approach was to take that multi-decade plan and bring it back in some more manageable pieces that we could focus on implementing. And that was to be provided in a 5-year time frame. And from our standpoint, it's really about developing that 5-year implementation plan, looking at the way that we can leverage some of those projects that are planned in 2019 and move some of those other projects forward that support the plan, but then come back and talk with the new council to confirm that the priorities that are set by the new council are in line with this approach, and then bring you a draft implementation plan, so a 5-year plan at the end of the second quarter. So we'll provide a bit of an update on where we are with that. So in July, last July, once the plan was adopted, we undertook sort of developing that draft implementation plan. And it was really based around a lot of the feedback that we'd received in the process we had just finished around the master plan. We heard not just about what people were looking for, but also where those high priority areas were. We looked at the city's strategic priorities and the projects that were already underway. And we also considered the transportation policies and some of the data that we had and where we should direct some of those initial pieces that we were building. And so when we think about that and highlight some of that, a piece that we did look at, some of the most recent information we have about the way in which some of our population travels comes from the 2016 census. And this is a map of the percentage of people that commute as a pedestrian. And so I think for the purposes of our discussion tonight in the presentation, it's really about areas that are red or that orange color are the areas in which we need to focus and look at what infrastructure and programs could be put in place to help move those targets forward. So from the standpoint of a pedestrian, from the aspect of where our commuting cyclers exist, and how those pieces also fit in with how we're supporting and linking our active trips into our transit network and the investments that we've made there. So I think in looking at that data and considering those other pieces, we then began a series of public consultation aspects through the late summer and early fall, through some online consultation, but also in visiting a lot of activities and meetings that were already underway out in the city with some pop-up events. And so what we heard from we heard through that consultation didn't really surprise us, I think, from the standpoint of what we had already heard as part of the master plan, but a real strong desire to have some east-west connections improved for cyclists, a desire to see neighborhood-level transportation plans completed in our North Kingstown area and then also in the western suburban areas, a need to improve connectivity even within the existing active transportation networks we have, so addressing gaps or barriers that already exist and removing those barriers, especially with respect to intersection crossings and some of the gaps that exist in our sidewalk network. And from a program side, a desire to focus on signage and wayfinding and awareness as it relates to AT users. So I think to that end, what we heard through the consultation and what we're building that draft implementation plan around is it based on those three categories that I talked about, the citywide routes, the neighborhood focus areas, and the programs. So we have 4 high priority citywide routes that were identified. This route, which provides an east-west connection along Front Road and King Street, and then linkages north along Bay Ridge Drive. A connection that's made between John Counter Boulevard and Concession Street as it extends along the Leroy Grant road allowance and roadway. An east-west connection that's created across the northern urban area of the city, connecting Taylor Kidd Boulevard, John Counter Boulevard, and along the third crossing. And some connections and linkages created between some existing cycling connections in the downtown on Brock and Johnson Street, but making those connections to the west and north along Parkway and connecting north into those neighborhoods. From a neighborhood standpoint, there was a strong preference for those western suburban areas, as I suggested, so areas in Bay Ridge and Redendale, and then also building on the work that we had started with the North Kingstown Transportation Plan. And building upon all of those pieces with developing sort of supporting programs and education aspects around that. So from a next step standpoint with respect to the implementation plan, we'll be reviewing these findings against what the strategic priorities that are set by the new council. So we'll be watching closely to understand how we can provide an implementation plan that lines up with council's priorities. We'll be looking at ways that we can take those recommendations that exist and line them up with other projects that may be underway in the city, creating those linkages. And then we will bring you an implementation plan, as I said, near the end of the second quarter. And as it stands right now, that implementation plan is focused in 4 areas. So it's focused on neighborhood level active transportation infrastructure policies and plans. It has a component related to the citywide active transportation infrastructure, an emphasis on the active transportation barriers and network gaps that need to be addressed, and again, those supporting programs and initiatives. So I think to that end, we're in 2019. The plan was adopted last June. I think we also want to provide you some context, I think, about the work that's underway in 2019 and how that is supporting the master plan that was adopted last June. So I think, thinking about those 4 categories that the implementation plan is going to focus on, for 2019, at a neighborhood infrastructure and policy level, we're focusing in on some infrastructure and programs that provide safer, more accessible routes to schools. So in particular, we're constructing a 1.6 kilometer multi-use path on Leroy Grant Drive. That's in line with one of the citywide routes that I just presented a map on. We're making changes to the Johnson and Brock Street cycling lanes to upgrade them to a buffered facility with bollards. And we're changing some of the way that those bollards, coupled with some of the center traffic calming bollards, will help address some of the concerns along those sections. We're installing a pedestrian signal at Johnson and MacDonnell to provide a safer access route to the north between some of the elementary schools, and that linkage to the northern, a link to the north to where the new high school is being built, and making some changes in the Concession Street area to narrow that area around Leroy Grant to slow some of the traffic and calm it. So I think with those projects, you can see the multi-use path, the 1.6 kilometer multi-use path is shown on the left-hand side of the screen. It makes a connection from 3rd Avenue in the south all the way north to John Counter Boulevard, with pathway connections to the east that will connect to the new high school. The map on the right-hand side shows that pathway that is there in the north, but then that connection and that safer access route to school that we'll be promoting along Macdonell Street, and how it connects into the upgraded pedestrian crossing at Johnson and Macdonell, and those upgraded cycling lanes and traffic calming that's being installed for Johnson and Brock. From a citywide standpoint in 2019, we have a number of sections of routes that are going in. We have buffered cycling lanes that are being installed on Taylor Kidd Boulevard from Gardner's Road to Princess Street, which will provide some future linkages into the work that's being completed on John Counter Boulevard. We have cycling lanes being installed on the remaining section of Montreal Street and a small section of Division Street. And those other pieces on Johnson and Brock that I already talked about. The lines that you see on the map in the red, those are multi-use path and cycling facilities that are in design for 2019. And the intention is that we're bringing some of those projects forward as part of the implementation plan. A major short-term project that we're looking at is centered along Front Road from Days Road to Portsmouth. And that is in line with some of the work that UK is doing, and we'll be upgrading the cycling facilities along that section to provide a separated multi-use path along the north side of Front Road and some southern sections as well. So from an active transportation barrier network gap standpoint, on that theme, we're building some sidewalk connections and filling in some gaps on Birchwood Drive, Taylor Kidd Boulevard, and Bath Road. Important connections to sort of fill those last remaining sections that had not been built. We're increasing the accessibility at 6 of our intersections with audible pedestrian signals. And we're building 3 intersection pedestrian signals, or IPSs. One at Johnson and Macdonell Street, which I already spoke about, one at Lakeview Avenue and Front Road, and one at Norman Rogers Drive at Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard. So the image that's at the bottom of the screen is an example of the one on King Street at the Tet Center. And so these installations are designed to support the high pedestrian volume that exists at these intersections, but it's also related to a program, again, tying in with our safer walk to school and our safer active routes to school that provides some of our existing crossing guard location with some upgraded infrastructure to better support that work. And we have some crossings going in along the KMP Trail on some remaining areas there at Hickson and St. Remy Place. From a design standpoint, in 2019, we'll be looking at the remaining crossing guard locations, the existing crossing guard locations, to assess the type of infrastructure that may need to go in to better support that work there, and considering some of those pieces and how they would fit in with the neighborhoods. And then finally, from a program standpoint, it's our focus in 2019 is really about education and outreach with our schools. We have a partnership that's forming with the health unit and the Limestone School Board around an active route to school, piloting that in the Lancaster Drive area with the schools that are there. We're looking at some infrastructure upgrades and programs that would support that. My department also manages the crossing guard program now, as well as parking enforcement. So we're looking at utilizing those resources in a more integrated way to better support the activities that occur around schools, especially around pickup and drop off, that we can support a safer area. And I think from a new program or some information side of things, the city will be installing its first bike box in the spring. And so for those that have not seen that in the past, a bike box is a piece of infrastructure, painted aspect at the intersections that's designed to give cyclists priority at the intersection. It allows space for a cyclist to be and allows cyclists to more easily make a turn at that intersection ahead of vehicles. So these are some visual examples of the bike boxes. The first bike boxes in Kingston will be installed along Division Street at the intersections of Queen and Princess, and that's sort of as we finalize the remaining pieces of the last phase of the Princess Street reconstruction. So that's an overview of sort of our next steps with the implementation plan, but then also those linkages that we're making with our 2019 capital and operations program. I'd be happy to take any questions about that.
Before we get to questions, I got a text from my wife asking me to go check on my son who's skating on Market Square. So I'll just take a 3-minute recess while I just run downstairs for a minute, make sure he's having a good time. Sorry. Yeah. Thanks for your patience, everyone. I went down, I couldn't see Oliver at first, and then he jumped up from behind the FebFest boards and went, boo! Oh. Anyway, yes, so I think for time management, what we'll do is actually, with consent of the committee, move information report C up to the top of the business so that we can deal with it right now. There's a member of the public here that wants to interact with staff on this. So yeah, so and Mr. Semple's just given his briefing, so it would be timely to deal with that, and then we'll come back to the solid waste items. So I just need consent of the committee, so all those in favor for moving that, and that passes. So the next item is actually the active transportation implementation plan update information report. And we go first to questions from members of the committee, then we go members of the public or ex officio council members. Yes, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. You know, to see Brock and Johnson Street in 2019. Do we have any general idea of the timeline when those improvements may be made? Both Councillor Stroud will agree with me that we heard an awful lot at the doors in that neighborhood during the campaign.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the work, the components of Johnson and Brock Street, the buffered cycling lanes and some of the center traffic calming bollards, those are slated to go in the late spring or early summer.
Excellent.
The other components related to the installation of the pedestrian signal at Johnson and MacDonell, and some of the other components to the north that involve the narrowing of Leroy Grant and some of those pathway connections will commence in the summer, and with a target to finish certainly the signal pieces in time for the beginning of school. But that's somewhat dependent on some other sort of resource allocation.
Thank you. And I know I shared with both you and Deanna an email that I'd gotten from a resident at Leroy Grant in the apartments there. And there's a very large component of elderly people, people that with some mobility challenges, and a frustration, particularly in the winter, where the only way to get around there is on the roads, but also issues with the narrow sidewalks and that. Is there any opportunity for us under this program or as a consideration? I believe I forwarded you that email some time ago.
Yes, through you. Yes, so I think we're aware of some of those concerns. I think the works that we have planned at Leroy Grant this year are related to some concerns around the pedestrian crossing and the width of that area, and the speed in which the vehicles were traveling. So it is work that's designed to support that pedestrian crossing across concession, which is what we understood from some of the residents in our discussions with Councillor Holland was a major barrier. there are other aspects to crossing at Concession and that we'll be looking at in the future. There are no plans to do any additional work in 2019. The other areas on Leroy Grant, especially sort of with those connections that link in to the south, are future works. There's no plans for that work this year. Our focus is on the construction of the In Boulevard Trail and that connection to 3rd Avenue.
Thank you.
Councillor Doherty?
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. That was a really good presentation. We've heard several, we haven't had the strategic planning yet, but we have had several themes running through a lot of our discussions, and they include obviously climate change as a focus, as well as the conditions of our roads and sidewalks and walkways, and the importance of attracting millennials and young people to Kingston. And I really see this active transportation plan central to achieving some of our goals. But for this question, I'm just going to focus on climate change. And I'm wondering if the 5-year plan and how we can attach quantify the savings, the greenhouse gas emissions savings through this active transportation plan, and what perhaps we can do to make sure the next 5 years is actually are great opportunities, perhaps offer us opportunities for some deep reductions in emissions. So what can we do to help the active transportation plan move from plan to action even faster? That's my question. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think certainly targets are very helpful, and those goals of what we're looking to meet provide some very clear guidance about the programs and the speed under which we need to implement those programs. So I think certainly setting some targets around those pieces. I think your question around how can we link the active transportation piece to quantify that with respect to like greenhouse gas reduction. I think that's certainly something that we can look at as a measurement. The city will be undertaking an update to our understanding of how our residents move through what's called a household travel survey in the fall of this year, and that will give us a new baseline for what our actual mode splits are right now, and from there we would be able to attach some goals pertaining to how far do we need to move towards the 20% AT target in order to shift, so many tons of greenhouse gas. So I think that aspect of it we would need to develop, but I think if we understand what your targets are as a council and what your goals are, we can certainly work to put together a program that would reflect that.
So just to follow up on that, so I believe we have greenhouse gas reduction targets, and I guess what she's asking is that going to be fully integrated into the implementation plan?
Yeah, I think for clarity, yes, we can ensure that is it's presently not discussed and was not discussed in detail as part of the active transportation master plan. But I think that's one of the reasons that we don't want to bring the implementation plan until we understand from our new council what your priorities are, because we can certainly work to ensure that that's reflected.
So I think you just said make sure
yes.
There's something in strategic planning about greenhouse gas emissions and active transportation. Okay, thank you. Councillor Osanik.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. As far as bikes go, on this, how they're always riding on the side of the road, I've had more than one cyclist say to me that our sewer grates, there's some sewer grates that are really bad because they're so deep and your bike tire just goes in there. Do our staff, what does the city need about that. Like, should tickets be made up for each one? Does Public Works, look for those sort of things proactively, or do we wait for the cyclists to send in a ticket to look at it? Like, one of them is Union Street as you're approaching King Street West, right in the village of Portsmouth, and like a bike tire would just get swallowed up. And I've heard the same thing on Bath Road in some spots, closer to Queen Mary Road, and it just makes the cyclists, like they say, it's dangerous, right? Riding on the side of the road in those situations when then they have to get more out into traffic. So I support the active transportation master plan, definitely, but how can we get those sort of sewer grates addressed?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The approaches that you talk about are all valid, right? So what I can say is, as we were developing the implementation pieces this past summer, if you remember the Mayor's Innovation Challenge sort of recipients from last year were an active transportation focus group. So they worked with our team last summer, and part of that was going out and assessing the state of our current infrastructure and identifying issues like you're referencing with respect to the sewer grates. With that said, I think it's if there's an individual or others that have identified an issue, we'd like to hear about it. So we may know about it, we may be working on it, but I think if there's a particular spot or location that's problematic, if we can hear about that through our customer service department, it allows us to track and quantify sort of areas that may be a concern. The third piece I will say about that is there's when we look at the infrastructure that we want to build, we are looking at the ways that we can create the best facility for cyclists and for pedestrians to use. Some of that is what we were talking about tonight with the creation of, separated areas, multi-use paths that are separated from the roadway that help address some of the concerns you were raising. With that said, the built infrastructure that exists today, and much of it that was built in the past, 50 to 70 years, was not necessarily designed with cycling in particular in mind. And so that's why we talk about with the master plan, it is a multi-decade plan, because some of these pieces that we want to build will be linked with sort of the longer term refurbishment of various parts of the network. We'll work to address those issues as best as we can, but many of those sewer grates in particular are in locations that would conflict with pieces of the infrastructure we want to build. I think we're aware of that. We consider that when we're looking at installing or signing new routes, but we won't be able to address all of those in the short term, if that's, yeah.
Thank you. And one more question. A constituent listened to me, and he just wanted me to mention it tonight, is a secure bike service in the downtown. So if we wanted to do something like that, like he said, he's been talking to city staff. I don't know which city staffs, I don't know if you've been aware, but it would be like a 24/7, it would be like an enclosed bike place, and we would have to have a security guard somehow connected to it to give somebody access to their bike at any times in the downtown. Are you hearing about it for the first time? If we wanted to pursue something like that, I guess we would have to do it as a motion, probably to this committee, to take it to the next step. That's not in your active transportation master plan, eh? And have you heard of this idea? Apparently Toronto has a lot of them, but he only gave me Toronto as an example.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I think starting at a high level, the master plan does talk about the need for the supporting infrastructure related to bike parking and secure bike parking. And so those are some of the programs and pieces that we would be looking at. We've not moved forward on those initiatives yet. It didn't come up as a high priority in our consultation. So it's not something that we're looking at in 2019. But it certainly is an aspect of what's being considered in the 5-year implementation plan that we're bringing. the particular, I think the particular proposal that you're speaking of, we are aware of it. We've met with that individual about those pieces. It's certainly an interesting program. And this type of innovative approach is part of what we are really interested in from the AT standpoint. Our plan talks about partnering with the community. It talks about creating and using stakeholders in the community to help create this culture of active transportation. With that said, I think in reference to that particular proposal, it did involve a monetary contribution that's not built into the 2019 operating budget. So I think it's certainly something that we're aware of, that we've been in some discussions of, but it's not something within our current operating budget that can be supported this year.
I have two questions, and then we're going to go to second round of questions. Councillor Neal has another question. First question should be fairly short. I'm sure many people are wondering this. What happened to Drop Bike?
Drop Bike is still, so Drop Bike, I believe I'm not in charge of that actual program. I might just look over to Mark, who's been involved with it more, but my understanding is that Drop Bike is gearing up for the start of this summer's program. And Mark, you have the details of the timing, I believe.
Mr. Dixon.
Through Chair, discussions with Drop Bike, and their current plan is to come and launch May 1st of this year. So that's where we're heading with Drop Bike at this time.
And Mr. had one at the, I don't know if you guys saw this, a newer model of bike with some improvements. Do you know anything? Are all of the new bikes going to be that second generation?
Yes, the new bikes is proposing are their newest generation bike. Yep.
Thank you. My second question is directly related to the report, is about the debris that collects and also snow in the wintertime so if we're talking about dedicated cycle lanes, especially with bollards, what will that look like next winter? And how do we interact? How is your department interacting with Public Works about snow removal and especially debris clear up at the end of the winter, the debris that collects in the cycling lanes?
Yeah, so our department, we're within the group that Public Works is within. This was a big discussion as part of the master plan. So, and I think it's well understood as something that the city needs to do better with respect to infrastructure. It's not just about building it and kind of walking away from it and hoping that active transportation happens, especially cycling. So the plan and the motion that council adopted with the master plan directed staff to bring an implementation plan back that spoke to the infrastructure and programs that we were going to put in place, but also the implications to maintain that infrastructure. So the plan that we will bring you will discuss those pieces, and certainly new infrastructure that is created will be created with a more holistic approach from the standpoint of creation, but also maintenance and upkeep. To that end, I think for our existing network and some of our existing cycling pieces, our Public Works group was actually, we were using this winter, 2018 and 19, as a bit of a data gathering exercise around sort of the ways in which they could maintain a portion of a winter network or some of the on-road cycling lanes. And then we'll be looking at that and kind of bringing that within our kind of maintenance fold. With respect to sort of the clear out of debris and sort of that spring and fall aspect that occurs, I believe, I'm just looking at Mr. Dixon, I believe it's a twice-a-year program now, but we're also working with Public Works to identify an appropriate level of service that we'd include in the implementation plan.
Through your chair, yes, that's correct. We have meetings with Public Works to discuss how those lanes would be cleared regularly. In specific, or in reference to the buffered bike lanes, we've talked about potential approaches to how those would be cleaned when the bollards are in place with sidewalk sweepers. So those have been discussed and have been planned and piloted last year on John Counter Boulevard.
That's great. It's great to hear they're thinking about that, because that's a common comment that I hear is like, how is that going to work with those two things, the sidewalk sweepers and the snowplows? That's it for my questions. So I'll go to Councillor Neal for his questions.
Thank you. What triggered this in my mind was some discussion about the condition of some of our bike lanes at various times, whether they be potholes or that. And with St. Paddy's Day coming up, I know in the core of the city we'll be faced with broken bottles and such. And we did 4 or 5 years ago pass a policy that other communities have done called I think it's called State of Good Repair policy that I don't think we do much publicizing about. But councillors are aware that if they get a complaint about glass in a bike lane, or there's a really bad pothole at the corner of these two streets, we contact Public Works, and it becomes a priority for Public Works to repair that. Is it possible for us to do some better publication of that and look into encouraging more people to take advantage of that?
Commissioner Kay.
Through the chair, certainly, we've been trying to make a number of improvements in Public Works areas, and I know that councillors are aware of how challenging it can be with multiple priorities, but that is definitely an area that we're looking at. So we can work with our communications group and do some awareness promotion. I just want to be a little bit cautious that we can meet an expectation if we start promoting call us with everything. The worst thing you can do is promote that and then not be able to get out and actually do something about it. So we're working towards it, and I will look to see ways that we could implement some awareness campaigns that are reasonably able to meet the expectation then.
Thank you. So that's members of the committee. So we'll go to members of the public and or ex officio council members for any questions, comments. Yeah. Mr. Healy, you want to go first?
Thanks. I like to preface my remarks by saying that I'm very familiar with the Active Transportation Master Plan, and have been very involved in it, and have a very good working relationship with the group. So my questions are more for, I guess, everyone to think about. But the last council meeting last night, which I watched on Kojiko, I couldn't get here. It was a lot of discussion about the emergency, the environmental climate change emergency. And the council meeting before that, on February 19th, there was a discussion prompted by Councillor Hutchison and Osanik's motion to find $25 million in a capital budget to be used for homelessness and road repair. And there were some comments made that kind of puzzled me a lot, and that was to do with where the answer to where would one find $25 million would be the first things that would be offered up for deferral would be Parks and Recreation and AT infrastructure, which was considered nice to have. So what I was particularly puzzled by the inability to join the dots between homelessness, which is for a lot of people, they can't afford a car, they can't afford a home, they can't afford a car, And so there's a large portion of our population that need AT. Climate change, there's no better way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions than to promote AT and reduce car trips. And yet it's still seen as a nice to have. And I just wonder if that is a pervasive thought among council and staff or not.
So that was kind of a two-pronged question to both council and staff. I would say that I can answer from council's perspective, it would be up to us to put things in the strategic plan that would prioritize active transportation if that's what we want to do. But as for staff, I guess Commissioner Kidd can take that one.
Through you, Mr. Chair. From a staff perspective, I don't think we were trying to express that the natural place to look would be recreation programs or AT infrastructure, because those were easy to push aside. The conversation from staff was more to the point that if we are looking to find $25 million of projects that could be deferred to the next term of council, perhaps, or even perhaps taken off the books. It would be projects that aren't currently underway, projects that, if they were deferred, would create some room in terms of the debt levels that we have, or create some room, or in how they're funded. So if a service is funded from a dedicated reserve fund, or not proceeding with that capital expenditure doesn't necessarily free up those dollars to spend on a general service area. So it was more about the money and not about the importance of the service. I think the struggle is we appreciate everything is important. And we realize that, and so it was more about that aspect of terms of how we fund things. So I'll give you a very specific example. There's a very large project in the capital plan for a parking garage, but the parking garage is 100% funded from parking reserve funds. So if we suggested that the parking garage could be a project that wouldn't be deferred, it doesn't necessarily mean that those funds would be available for affordable housing. So that was the conversation from a staff perspective.
Okay, and I just reminded myself that procedurally we're supposed to get all the questions from all the members of the public before and have staff answer them all at once. But so from now on, that's what we'll do. So any future questions yourself or Councillor Hutchison or any other members of the public have, we will take note of those, and then we'll get answers from staff to all of them. Do you have any comments or questions? Oh, that was it. Okay. Any other members of the public? Councillor Hutchison, did you have anything you wanted to ask? Okay. So there is no actionable item on that, so that's it for the active transportation implementation plan. I would just say, just a comment to my colleagues that I'm expecting this to come up during strategic planning, so don't forget about active transportation if we want to see it happen. As we have it would be a real shame to have all this great setup work done and then not have it in our strategic plan. So thank you, Mr. Semple. So we're in business. That was item C that was moved to the front. So there's two other items. We're going to item A now. Both of these have to do with solid waste. So it's the recommendation to proceed with the dual stream recycling system. There's a recommendation in the package to remind members of the committee. The recommendation specifically says that Council approve the Solid Waste Services Department to proceed with the next phase to convert the existing 4-stream alternating blue and gray recycling box, gray box recycling system to a dual stream weekly system and service level for July 1st, 2021. That's the first. And B, Council direct staff to proceed with an RFP for the retrofit design and build of a dual stream material recovery facility, or MRF. And C, Council direct staff to proceed with a request for proposal for the weekly dual stream collection of both blue and gray boxes. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Questions only at this point? Yes, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Something that came to mind as we were asking questions during the briefing regarding this. I was just curious. I know from the AMO waste management meeting we attended a year or so ago, there was a lot of concern expressed about stranded assets and what would happen because the provincial government hasn't really clearly defined where we're going with all of this. Perhaps you could address that concern, and if we go dual stream, are we more inclined to have an active role to play in any future 100% recovery, and so stranded assets potentially would be less of a concern?
Stranded asset, Roberts.
So through you, your chair, what we know currently today about transitioning to full producer responsibility, that one of the key things in the Resource Recovery and Productivity Act is that the ministry has said that they want to have regard to minimize stranded assets. And so in a full producer responsibility regime, the producers will be responsible for delivering a service, and what we know is that they're likely to use municipalities for that service. What we heard is that they have no interest in doing collection or hiring collection themselves. They hope that municipalities continue to do that. In terms of a material recovery facility, which could become a stranded asset, there is some truth in that. Our facility could become a stranded asset in after it transitions to a full producer responsibility. But when we consider where we are in the province, when we consider studies that have been done that identify where other material recovery facilities are, there's a very good chance that the producers are going to want to use our facility in some shape or form, whether that's for processing and doing everything that we do today, or using some of that equipment to just process paper, or use it as a transfer station. When you consider our population and who's around us, it's very likely that they are going to want to do business with the city, but we still don't know that today. But what we know is that the province has clearly identified that they have an interest, that municipalities are not going to be left with stranded assets, and how would stranded assets be dealt with? Thank you.
And it seems to me, recall, and it may have been a meeting or from some discussions outside of that meeting, there has been some interest shown by some of our nearby municipalities in looking at our MRF, and are we currently providing that service to any nearby communities?
Your chair. Yes. Currently, right now, we have service agreements, and we have for a number of years with South Frontenac and Loyalist Townships. So we process all of their recyclables. They hire contractors to pick it up, and then they just deliver it to us. And we have contractual agreements to make sure that we're not subsidizing the cost of providing processing. And yes, we have been contacted by other municipalities like Frontenac Islands and Central Frontenac, North Frontenac, looking to have similar service agreements with us. Right now they're using private organizations, and they basically drive right by Kingston.
And you anticipate next question about full cost recovery. Thank you.
Councillor Doherty has another question. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through. You mentioned earlier that some of our machinery and equipment is aging. So does this sound like this is an opportunity that, in a sense, we might be saving doing it now than waiting and maybe making the same decision later on down the track?
So through Chair, I think I would also just clarify,
for everyone that any costs related to our recycling program, so any kind of capital investment that we put into the processing facility is actually 50% of that will be paid for by the producers under the existing regulations. So when we submit that data to get our funding back, it is amortized. So that's also a critical point, I think, here to add, that when the producers start looking for infrastructure to support their obligations after it transitions to a full producer responsibility, they're also going to be keeping in mind the investments that they've been making over the years. And they will want to be able to meet their obligations in a way that is cost effective. So by going forward with it now, I would just again say that 50% of that would be covered. And in the future, if producers do want to engage with the city and have a contract for providing service, we could then look at having more of that cost recovered in the future, while keeping that facility operational in our community, or else we would have to look at where else are we sending these recyclables, which is unknown, and I don't have any idea what that would look like.
Great. And now we would go to members of the public with any questions. And ex officio council members. Councillor Hutchison. You need to come forward to a microphone.
I just have a very small piece of it. So does that mean that the 3.5 or it's 3, I think it's 3.25 million you're talking about to upgrade the facility is going to be half paid by producers over time? I know you have to report it.
Chair, that is correct. So estimated costs to retrofit the MRF to a dual stream is approximately $1.8 million. We have 3.2 in the capital budget, but yes, to your question, presumably over time, the producers pay for 50% of that cost.
And you just that the facility isn't working proper as well as it should, especially for a dual stream, but it's wearing out as well. So we'd have to do something. I think that was part of your message, regardless, right? Then we decide whether it needs that or not. We don't need their permission,
Chair, that's correct. We do permission.
but they will have to pay 50%
But they will
of costs.
50% under the current regulation.
No, I'm just, you did say, I wanted to be absolutely sure that's what you're saying. Okay, thanks.
And just for further clarity for members of the public, so the 1.8 million estimate, our share of that would be 900,000, and that's where that number is coming from in the report.
Through you, I don't believe that we talked about that specifically in the report. So the cost that we think to upgrade the MRF, the full 100% cost is 1.82 million. Over the years, we will report that investment into our information for funding back. So over time, the city's investment would be 900,000, the producer's investment would be 900,000.
Okay. Any other members of the public? Please come forward to a microphone and just say your name. And I know you spoke to us last night, but just for those who weren't.
Sure. I'm Emily Ferguson, Kingston Climate Hub, and I was just curious, building on the climate emergency that was declared last night, whether there's been any analysis done on the difference around greenhouse gas emissions between the 4-stream versus the 2-stream, and also whether there's any plans in the works with waste management when it comes to moving towards zero emissions.
Okay, before, are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? No, okay, so that's all the questions from members of the public. Go ahead, Ms. Roberts.
So thank you, and I might get you to clarify a couple of things there. The answer is no, we haven't looked at what greenhouse emissions could be eliminated specifically if we went to dual stream. What we do know is that it is very possible that our contracted collection may be able to reduce a truck on the road because they would be able to do each stop quicker. So there is a case there that we would have less recycling trucks on the road to complete the collection because they would be moving at a faster speed without having to do so much sortation at the curb and have the trucks idling. Your other question was about reducing waste management. So we do have an understanding of the quantity of recyclables that we sell, or it's not we sell, sorry, that we send to landfill every year. And some projections could be done off of that of how much greenhouse gas emissions that would give off through methane and other greenhouse gases. So we know that by capturing more recyclables and sending less to landfill has a positive effect on greenhouse gas emissions. So not only would we potentially save on fuel from trucks that are doing collection, there also is some very obvious savings from not sending those materials to landfill. However, there's also cases about how much that material then has to move around to be made into a new product. So it's a tough calculation to do. And another point that I would say is that the province of Ontario, under their Waste-Free Ontario Act, has identified that that is a target. They would like to see zero greenhouse gas emissions from waste management in the future. And their intention is to continue to recover and have a circular economy.
Great, thank you. Do you have any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm also wondering whether the city has ever considered doing single-sided pickup. For example, say odd years, you'd have everybody carry it to one side and then even years the other instead of the trucks going up and down.
Through you. Thank you. I have not considered that in my time at the city. I do know that other municipalities have considered it. It is something that has come up from time to time, and part of the issues that we have flagged with that is it's pretty important for us to know whose garbage belongs to who. So especially when we're trying to deliver a one-bag garbage limit per week, asking people to move their waste to the other side of the road, and have these collection piles. If there were more bags, we wouldn't know who it belongs to. And if we left a bag of garbage, who's taking responsibility for that bag of garbage? Because I can tell you it won't belong to the person whose house it's sitting at. And then also with recycling boxes and green bins, it's an awful lot of bins that are getting mixed up from house to house. But it certainly is something that is talked about in the industry.
Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek. It is now on the floor. Before we start discussion, I just want to point out a procedural note. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Clerk, but this vote is committee vote. If we are talking about any kind of spending, that's a council decision. So any kind of deferral of this recommendation, especially the one that talks about the upgrade, deferral here at committee is not the place where the deferral ought to happen. If you were thinking of deferring the work, that deferral needs to happen at council. Can the clerk confirm that?
Just for clarity, are you asking about deferrals given consideration to budget considerations? Yes, budget is typically decided on by council, so that would probably be more appropriate as you described.
So if that's what you're thinking, committee members, if you're thinking of saving money and voting against the recommendation, you would need to do that at council. And I suppose one way to get there would be to have a committee recommend against if we vote that way. But we would still need to discuss and talk about the budget at council, and that's actually where that decision gets made. I just wanted to make that clear before we go into deliberations. Who would like to speak? Okay, Councillor Hutchison, come take a spot at where you formerly sat up until 2 months ago.
Actually, I just had a couple of little things. I had some druthers about this proposal as I read it. because of the 3.25 million and what we were going to get from it. But the explanation given by by staff sort of satisfies me. If the actual amount is 1.8 million and we're only going to pay half of it, and it's preparing the city for putting it in a better position so we can control our own recycling over time, which is, I think, is where staff is coming from. And incidentally, I said it was the main reason, not the only reason. Okay, I can read the report. That means that the savings on the capital budget would only be $900,000. Doesn't seem worth it. My main concern is I want to see us build affordable housing. So I'm looking for places where you can save it. Okay? It's got to come from someplace. And actually, if you look at the capital budget, if I just take a second to say this, you can see the city is not wasting your money. It's really obvious. If you take it from one place, you don't have it for someplace else. And we have not done the housing problem. We haven't done the greenhouse gas problem either, but we've done actually more than we've done housing. So anyway, I wanted to say that. And a couple of other things. I just want to take issue with a couple things staff said, inadvertently perhaps. That is, diversion is more expensive than landfill. And I've heard that argument for longer than you've been at the city, okay? The problem with that argument is you can't find landfill. People don't want our garbage, right? And so I used to say this when I was talking to other managers, okay? Is you're not taking into account the fact that landfill new projects tend not to be happening over the last 15 years because people made such a political fuss about not wanting it. So you would have to project back to when they were doing landfill, find out what the cost was, and project forward to get an actual comparison. Does that make sense? So there are costs to the landfill, but they're not properly calculated. That's what I'm saying. And so diversion, it's really unclear whether diversion is more expensive or not because we're not actually accounting for landfill properly, the capital costs. Or the operating, okay?
Staff doesn't need to answer that. It's not to the point of recommendation.
No. And the other thing came up was the large item pickup. I was on the council decided not to do that. And the reason is that it's horrible to have to manage, okay? And just to get, it came up again a few years later, and basically it feeds in, like let me just say, it feeds into the attitude which is sort of like the greenhouse gas item, out of sight, out of mind. And it detracts from the idea that you've got to be responsible for what you produce and what you use, okay? And so then it puts it back on the person who purchased it, and probably should be the producer, but we're slowly getting there. The second thing is it came up again a few years later. And just to get started, staff figured out, just to get the program started again would cost us $185,000. So easily north of $200,000 just to get started. Then you got to run it. So I don't want to go there. I can't see how that helps us in climate terms or budget terms or in any that helps us.
Okay, Councillor. Yeah, and thanks for your input. We have a recommendation on the floor, and are there any deliberations, any debate? So we'll vote on the recommendation. The three recommendations, vote on them together, right, Mr. Clerk? Yep. So it's all together, A, B, and C. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. Good luck. The second item of business, the only one left, is an information report about the larger waste diversion rate and integrated waste management plan update. I just had a question or comment, I guess it's just a comment, about the list again. Let me find that list. And what I don't see on here, but I'm actually, with the time, it's getting late and I have to go find my son again, so I'm actually not going to bring this up because it could be another discussion and it's not time sensitive. Any other questions about the integrated waste management plan? Okay, great. Thanks so much for your briefings. And I guess, sorry, members of the public? Yeah, sorry. I'm looking forward to going and find my son, I guess. There's nothing else of business, so it's just, there's no new motions or notices of motion. So it's, the next meeting is April, so a month hence, April 9th, second Tuesday, 6 p.m. I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Rosanek, Councillor Doherty, all those in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.